Hello, this is Jimbo from the YouTube channel Jimbo, South Dakota, and this is a Hog House Chronicles podcast. And as you can tell, we're in a little bit different area. We are on my premises. The hog house is right out there, but it is pretty dang hot out there. So we are also in the middle of a first floor remodel in our house. So if you go to the YouTube channel, you'll see that there's some different playlists. One of them's mini excavator. People love that one. It started one with remodel the house, so it kind of ties in together there. And I was contacted by Terry Bergman, sitting on the end, and this is his brother Rick, and their uncle Lowell Gilbert. Do you go by Gil?
Please.
Okay. And yeah, Terry was filling me in on some history. A lot of times we talk about family history in the military. Well, we have a lot of it right here. And we also have your brother Jim sitting over here. He's the heckler, I believe. So I did not mic him up. So if he does heckle, we might not be able to hear much anyway. Lowell's got some Vietnam experience, and you two were Air National Guard?
Yep.
In South Dakota?
And Minnesota.
And you did
And I was also in Battle Creek, Michigan, and Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Fort Wayne. Okay, cool. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and pull right into it here, Gil. And you can just start off with saying whatever you want to about where you grew up, how you grew up, siblings, and then we'll just go from there.
Well, if I tell you how I grew up, you won't believe me. But I was born in here on the 4th of December, 41, and that's 1941. And grew up on a family farm northeast of town near Carpenter, South Dakota. I have an older sister, the mother of these three kids, are adults. And things are pretty sparse. We had a 3-room, not a 3-bedroom, a 3-room house that was uninsulated and out in the middle of the prairie there. There was a barn and a chicken coop and a granary, and that was about it. My dad was a dryland farmer, and sister and I both went to one-room grade school for 8 years, and yes, I rode a horse to school many days. I graduated from here in high school in 1959 at South Dakota State College. A lot of people don't realize that South Dakota State used to be a college, but I graduated from South Dakota State College in 1963 and was in ROTC and entered the Air Force on 18 November 1963 to go to pilot training. And people say, how do you remember 18 November? Well, if you remember 22 November, you can backdate 5 days to 18 November. Does anybody here know what happened on the 22 November 63?
Kennedy. Not?
Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh, there you go.
So 5 days into my Air Force career, I lost my commander-in-chief. And I want to preface this by saying anything I say about military career, please remember that this is only the years from 63 to May of 1981. I spent 7 years on active duty and then 10 years in Air National Guard in Montgomery, Alabama, and then the other 13 in the reserve side doing non-flying work. So anything I say about flying or Vietnam or anything like that pertains to that time period and to me only. People can be in the same squadron and have totally different experiences, be at different bases, will be completely different. So anything I say about that will be just what happened to me and what I saw and observed. That's about it as far as the military goes.
Okay. How was it that you got into the military, got drawn to it?
Well, I love to read. My grandmother taught me to read at a young age, and then somehow or other, right after World War II, started first grade in 1947, somebody brought a bunch of National Geographic magazines to our school, and in there was all kinds of stuff from World War II, starting from the get-go on, and a lot about aviation. And I really got interested in airplanes, and that was the key. There was a couple people from South Dakota, or actually 3, that I kind of followed. Marvin and Melvin McNichol were generals after World War II, both fighter pilots in World War II. They were from Doland, which is just about 15 miles due north of our farm that we used to own. And then Joe Foss, of course, being a hero to most South Dakotans from that time period. And my goal when I went into flying school was to go to flying school and get out and fly for the airlines. And so my goal was to get a C-135 out of flying school. And that all changed when I had my first ride in a T-38. I went through flying school in Lubbock, Texas, at Reese Air Force Base, and the first flight in the T-38 is called a dollar ride, and you sit along for the ride. You're in the front seat, instructors in the back, and you go supersonic, and you get to do some stuff like that. And I said, this is pretty nice. So I started working a little bit harder because I decided I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And that's how I ended up being in fighters. Lucky enough to graduate high enough my class to get the F-4, and I got to fly it for almost 17 years, which I just about had it figured out towards the end, I think. But just got just under 3,000 hours in the airplane, a couple tours in Southeast Asia, 3.5 years in Germany, and then off active duty and 10 years in the Air National Guard in Montgomery.
Where was your reserve time?
My reserve time, I spent staff tour at the Pentagon, and then when I had working in the Tactics and Training Division, Director of Operations, and then when I was promoted to 06, I was assigned as the Deputy Commander and Chief of Staff of Special Operations Command Atlantic, which in those days every unified commander had a SOC, and we were Atlantic Commander SOC, and we were stationed at Fort Bragg, and then they eventually moved us to Norfolk NAS to be near the Landcom commander. And so I did that until I retired in 93.
Nice.
Lucked out.
I'll insert one little thing since you just said that. I remember about 2 months before I retired, we talked about General Steve Doohan, and his son Jeremy was the very first podcast and the first father-son fighter pilot one. And I was walking through the hall probably 2 months, 3 months before I retired, and he heard me say, he said, "Man, we sure are lucky to be able to retire at the age that we do," and all that. And he stopped me. He looked at me and he says, "Lucky based on good decisions in the past." I have lived by that ever since, or stated it that way. So all right. Well, we're going to get back to you got a lot of stuff to unwrap.
Oh yeah.
So we'll give you just a little bit of a break there.
Speaking of luck, if you don't mind me mentioning one of the best things that ever happened to me in my entire life is my mother told the county superintendent of schools that she was going to send me to school when I was 5. And because in those days you had to be 6 before 1st September, mother said, "No way." I think she wanted me out of the house. But as I passed my Air Force career, the guys that were exactly 1 year behind me had a totally different career path than I did. And we can get into that later, but I just thought about that.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And the other thing that we'll get to you in a second here, Rick, this is the 50th Hog House Chronicles podcast, and we've been doing it just a hair over 2 years. 2 years and 2 weeks right now, I think, something like that. So, yeah, I want to thank you for coming on, and like I said, we got a lot of cool stuff to unwrap there. So, all right, Rick, which of you two is older?
Unfortunately, I'm the older one.
Unfortunately.
Can't you tell?
So, why don't you go ahead and do the same thing about how you grew up, and of course there will be some mirror image stuff there, but how you got into the military.
Yeah, so I was born in Huron, 1963, April, and it's an eventful year for a number of reasons there that Lowell just outlined.
Yes.
But I grew up in Huron and went to school in Huron, and then I would spend my summers out on the family farm. That was the best part for me, was out there doing that stuff and being out around doing all the farming and those types of things. And then graduated here in high in 1981. And when I realized that the sports scholarships weren't rolling in like I thought they should have, I had to start looking at other options. And I started looking at the Army National Guard because one of my hockey coaches was the commander at the Army National Guard unit in Huron. And then unbeknownst to me, Lowell told this later, but he had a conversation with my father, and my dad said to me, he goes, "You may want to rethink going in the Army because you want to think about where you're going to sleep at night. You want to sleep on a foxhole," because my dad was in the Army and had experienced all of that after World War II, around the Korean War time. So I reconsidered, got into the South Dakota Air Guard, and from there I got in and worked in the munition shop. So I had bombs, bullet, missiles, chaff and flare on the A7, and spent in the South Dakota Guard a little over 8 years with them, and we had moved from South Dakota to Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and the winter drives were getting to be too much.
Sure.
Coming across the prairie, and so then I switched units and went to the Minnesota Air National Guard in the Twin Cities, the 133rd Airlift Wing, and started being a traditional guardsman there, working in computers and other sorts of things. And then when Desert Storm hit, the opportunity presented itself to go out there full time. So I went out there full time as a technician and did a variety of jobs between admin and computers and transportation, et cetera. And then after 16 years being in the Guard, our children, we have twin boys that were growing up, and I needed to be around them a lot more.
Right.
And so then I made the tough choice of saying, okay, I'm going to hang around them. I shouldn't have. I should have stuck it out.
4 more years, man.
I should have, but
Wow.
know, at that time when you're looking at it, that's how it ends up working. And so that's what I did. But the good thing that came out of it is the career after. There was a lot learned that I can take advantage of. So
Nice. All right. Yeah. Thanks for that. And Terry, how about you?
So I was born in Huron, 67, graduated in 85. We played every sport we could play. Like Rick was saying, our hockey coaches were all vets from John was in the Army National Guard there as commander. And then, we had Jim Highland, who was Navy. There was Jim Sheridan, that was a Marine in Korea. All of those folks were, you were around them, and Uncle, of course, is in the Guard, and I'm going, how am I going to go to college? And Rick said, hey, go to the Air Guard. So, who do you go see at that time? Dan Jennings.
Yep. We hear that name a lot.
Everybody goes see Dan Jennings. So you go in there to Dan Jennings, and you give him your ASVAB scores, and he goes, what do you want to do? And I go, I want to be the closest I can to the airplanes. And he goes, well, that would be a crew chief. So I ended up starting off in the phase docks, getting in as a crew chief with Orv Grenevold, and the two guys that were training me, was I got to remember their actual names. It was Horse and Cockbreath. Is how they were introduced. So it was Orrin Chase and Neil Aker. So I started off with Neil Aker, and at that time you had Orv was in charge, and it was Neil, and those were the guys who were training us. We had Fast Eddie, or Eddie Revell in there. Harlan Havlin.
Harlan Havlin. Yeah, with names like that, that's why he asked me more than once what was my nickname in the Air Guard.
Yeah,
he wasn't believing. Jim wasn't remembering or believing it was just Jimbo.
No.
Now I know why with names like that.
Yeah, that's how you kind of got started, And then there were a few traditionals in there also. But then eventually I started off there, and it was great because you went to basic training, you got out. They didn't have room in the tech school, so I went straight out to the Guard base. They put me to work on the airplane right away. So you're going to learn every, Horst looks at you and goes, you're going to learn every part of this plane because I'm not doing anything. You're going to do it all. So you got to do everything on that aircraft, which turned out to be, I liked it, but it was great because when I said I'd like to go out on the flight line, and as you're going through that, and then my trainer on the flight line, see, when I went out there, it was Dean Axel was in charge, and then my trainer was Marlon Nelson, and Marley was just always going, always constantly going. I was working with Marley, Bendinger, I got to stop think here. Several of those guys, Steve Christensen, all those guys were kind of in that time frame, and it was a lot of fun because you just got to go work. But starting off in phase docks, I had that 7 level was already done because I'd touched every component on the plane. So it was kind of nice to do that and to start that way.
So were you guys interested in the military like as kids, or when did you guys get interested, knowing that you wanted to go in?
I didn't really know that I wanted to go in. I saw this as an opportunity of how I was going to pay for college and go to college.
Okay.
And then once you did it, you say, hey, this is kind of fun. And, oh, by the way, I'm 18 and they gave me an airplane to work on.
That's
You know,
very common.
That's like, holy cow, they trust me with this? You know, do they really know what they're doing?
I know that feeling. Only at 21.
How about you, Rick?
I with Uncle flying, there was always an interest there, but it wasn't a passionate interest, which it should have been. But then when I got in, it's like, okay, I'm really learning a lot. This is a lot of fun. You're learning things. And then I tried to go into flying, but my eyes were too bad. So
Sure.
so then I couldn't do that, but I would have if I could have.
Mm-hmm. What were your hobbies as kids?
Hockey, hunting, swim team, all sorts of different things.
Yeah, no. Unbeknownst to us, at the time, our father did a lot of woodworking, refinishing projects, doing things for people. So we picked up these skills, and begrudgingly, because that's how he paid for us to go to hockey camps, was us doing this work and him getting money.
Had to participate.
Yeah, so for us to participate in those sports, there was a little work you had to do to get into it, and besides working out on the farm again, because I ended up, when my grandfather retired from farming, then I ended up working with my best friend's farm south of here and doing that. But
Well, that's a good way to learn responsibility and participate and be responsible and all that. So, yeah. Gil, how about you? When you were young, what kind of hobbies did you have?
We didn't have much. We didn't have electricity to start with until about 1950. A lot of pheasant hunting out there. Pheasant hunting in the late 40s and into the mid to late 50s was really, really good. I played junior legion baseball for Carpenter. Yes, they had a baseball team. It was out in the pasture. And I'm serious. And then in high school, I played football, basketball, and did a little weight stuff and track, and that was about it. One claim to fame I have about sports here in high school is the 57-58 season. We had perfect seasons in football and basketball. We lost every football game and won every basketball game. So that's our claim to fame that year.
Yeah.
Won the state championship. It was a lot of fun.
Right. Well, Rick, you mentioned scholarships that didn't come around. What sport was that for?
either football or hockey.
So either one.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. No, when no one came knocking at the door, then I had to go to Plan B.
Didn't have to turn anybody down.
No.
Takes that pressure off, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Gil, let's start rolling into what you experienced in the military. And like I said before, we can start chronologic, but if any of you have thoughts forward, back, whatever, we can jump around all you want.
Well, like I said earlier, I initially wanted to be a mini-motor pilot, which later in my life I did become that. But I got in a T-38, and I said, this is kind of nice. And so I worked really hard, and there was 45 guys in my flying school class that graduated. We didn't start out that many. There's some washed back to our class, some left. And anyway, I finished number 8, and we had 3 F-105s, 2 F-100s, and 1 F-102. And those went to the top 7 guys, I guess that would be, whatever it was. Then my good friend was one ahead of me. He took an RF-4C to Alconbury, England. And so it came to me, and I chose an RF-4 to MacDill Air Force Base down in Tampa. And the only reason I did is because the syllabus for that, when I was going through Davis-Monthan to learn the airplane, was completely different than all the other backseaters, because I was going to an operational unit. And I had to have air refuelings and formation takeoffs and formation landings, and I had to be basically qualified and everything. So when I got to my unit, I could take a look area checkout, an instrument check, and a TAC eval on the range, and I'd be combat ready. And that's what happened. 3 flights, and I was ready to go. And so in late July, I got to MacDill in June of '65, got crewed up with one of the best guys you could ever imagine, a Navy exchange pilot that was the first ensign in the Navy ever to get an F-4 out of flying school. He had 2 tours in the Ranger already in the Gulf of Tonkin on what was the name of the station? Can't remember what they called it out there. Anyway, he had 2 tours in the Ranger, a bunch of traps. He had all kinds of flying time, and he taught me more about flying the F4 than anybody could ever. He picked up his 1,000th hour in the F4 when we were initially deployed to the Philippines and then went to Cameron Bay, except it's all messed up. But anyway, he taught me a lot, and I really lucked out. So we went to the Philippines initially, and then they took 8 crews of us, 4 initially and then 4 more later. I was in a second group that went forward to Yuban, Thailand. There was 2 squadrons there that were operating. One was a sister squadron from MacDill, and another one was from George Air Force Base in California. And of the 4 crews they sent to initially, we lost 1.5 of them, and there's a story about that. And then we went and fly with the 431st and flew a few missions there. And then my squadron moved on to Cameron Bay and opened up that place. And so then they took what was left of us down to Cameron to rejoin our squadron. But as we were talking earlier, and what you would say the pre-brief here, on the 5th of October 1965 was my first mission in North Vietnam. We were flying EB-66 Escort, and two of my squadron mates from the 43rd Squadron that was flying with a different squadron got shot down. And what would we say? He spent 2,600 days up in Hanoi as POW, 7.5 years. And then they came back, and the aircraft commander, he couldn't get back, his flying physical back, but the backseater, Tom Barrett, was a T-38 instructor after that for quite a few years before he retired. And we were supposed to be gone for 90 days, and we ended up being remote for a little over 5 months. And when we came back to MacDill, they didn't know what to do with us. And so the guys were running out of missions quicker in Southeast Asia than ever expected as far as completing their tours. They had different things they could do to hurry up and get out of there. And so our squadron became a schoolhouse, and so they took the first group of the highest-ranking backseaters in a squadron and made them the first-class aircraft commanders. And then there was about 6 of us left, and I was the lowest ranking and the youngest. And so they said, okay, you guys you have a choice. You can go back to Southeast Asia, the back seat, or you can go to George Air Force Base in California and check on the front seat. Well, duh. So we drove to Victorville, California, and I ended up checking out in the front seat with the exact same squadron I flew with at Yuban in that first tour. So I knew everybody. It was kind of like old home week. So went through checkout as aircraft commander. While there, I got my orders to go to Yuban and the Triple Nickel 555th Tech Fighter Squadron, which was a godsend. And so I did that. And that was a PCS tour. In order to do a PCS tour and do it quickly, all you had to do is get 100, what they called counters, 100 missions up north. And so that's what most of us strive for. And it was kind of funny. My PCS tour to Thailand was shorter than my TDY tour, because that was 5 months, and I flew the 100. And I had a few counters, about 7 or 8 counters from my backseat tour, so those counted towards 100. But I finished in just a little over 4 months. Mm-hmm. It was interesting. I flew my 100th mission 9 days after my 25th birthday, which I spent my 24th birthday at Cam Ranh in Vietnam, and then my 25th in Thailand. And I was the youngest aircraft commander at that time to do that in the Air Force, which I'm not sure anybody ever passed that. I'm not sure, because it was just luck of the draw. Like I said, starting school at 5 years old. My backseater I had when I got to Germany was exactly 1 year behind me in flying school, and he spent his whole career in the back seat of the F4. He never got to check out his front seater, and he got off active duty, which I understood. I guess I should mention, for the in-country tour down South Vietnam, it was piece of cake. There was hardly anything you saw or did or anything like that. The only time it got really dicey, if you got troops in contact, and then all rules went out of window. You did what you could to get your ordnance on those guys as close as you could. I mean, in the fact of saying 30 or 40 meters, that's pretty close in those days. These were old airplanes. Remember?
Danger close.
Yeah, the F-4 did not have a lead computing gun sight. It didn't have any kind of weapons release system that you could use a radar for and all that. That all came in the D model, which I flew in Germany.
Yeah, your standard danger close parameters are a ways beyond that.
Boy, it was dicey sometimes. But I don't know, you wear your hat to Costco, and you see all these vets, and they got talking, and then it's a good place to meet veterans, and because we're old, especially my group. But they always give thanks and all that stuff. The outcountry tour, I flew. North Vietnam was divided into 6 what they call route packs. Route pack 1, 2, and 3 were down south. 4 was kind of central. 5 was on the northeast corner, and 6 was in the center of the country, the northwest corner, and that's what we got. The Air Force, the Navy did towards the water there, because that's where their boats were. And a typical strike package was 24 airplanes. You had the first 4 in were F-105 wild weasel birds. There was 2 wild weasel airplanes, a leader and number 3, and then the other 2 guys were D models that were just flying to drop bombs and stuff. And the lead airplane, he was the strike force commander. Then the second 4 that would go in would be us, and we'd either be carrying 7 1,000-pounders or 8 750s, or maybe just a few bombs on the center line, depending on what they decided, and then 8 missiles, 4 Sidewinders and 4 Sparrows. And our job usually was to drop some bombs and then set up a low-altitude MiG screen to protect the rest of the strike force. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. Sometimes we got in and out without anybody getting hurt, and other times we didn't. And so it was... you just never knew. You knew North Vietnam like the back of your hand, because North Vietnam's not a very big country. If you compare it to some of our states, I mean, it's really small. And then when the frag orders came down every day, the way our squadron worked, we had 3 squadrons at U-Bahn, the Triple Nickel, the 433rd, and the 497th. The other 2 squadrons were night fighters. And I have friends that flew 100 missions over North Vietnam and never saw the ground. They did everything at night, and that would have driven me crazy. But you could see more coming up at you at night, though, I know that. We were, and our way our schedule was supposed to work is a primary flight day, a secondary flight day, an off day, a duty day, and then an off day. Well, that very seldom happened. But on the primary flight day, you knew that you were going to have something to do. And the JCS, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, picked out certain targets. There's about 40 targets in North Vietnam, and they were called JCS 1 through 40. And the frag came down, and the squadron would be assigned, JCS 3, and you go, oh, my word. But anything up north was hard. It was hard. You really had to keep your eyes peeled. The F-4 had a distinct disadvantage in my mind, because you had 2 engines and you had 2 pilots. And it was nice to have a guy in the back seat who was not afraid to say something and take control. And twice my back seater saw Sam coming, and I didn't. And he took the airplane and saved us.
Wow.
And we still remain friends, believe it or not. But I'm sorry about this.
Oh, no worries. No worries at all.
And another time when we were flying up north, that we would disregard the rules as far as altitude and stuff, was when somebody got shot down. Mm-hmm. And once the Jollies got up there and the Sandys were there and stuff, they'd take over the rest cap, and they'd bring more tankers north up over Laos. And sometimes you'd be full 5 or 6 times on a rest cap. Might have an 8-hour mission just to try to get guys out.
How long could you fly between refuelings generally? It
really depended on your load and what you were doing.
Right.
On that situation there, you'd be pretty, by that time, you would probably avoid the bombs by that time, because you probably dropped your bombs by the time that all started. And you could go up the tanker, fill up, you could 17,000 pounds of gas. If you had 8 missiles, you could stay a long time. And once or twice I had ended up firing air-to-air missiles at the ground to try to keep gooks off the guys. And it was successful a lot of times getting people out. There was course, a lot of times they were so far in you couldn't get guys out. If you were lucky enough and you got hit, and you were in about the center of North Vietnam and you're headed east, what you want to do is beat feet for the water, because your chances of getting picked up are about 99.9%, because the Navy had airplanes out there orbiting, waiting for people to come out and eject. And the recovery rate was much higher out over the water than it was. I was looked up the other day, and the Air Force lost 445 F-4s in Vietnam. Well, with 18 UE squadron, that's 24 squadrons of airplanes, basically, that we lost. We had the highest loss rate in the war because we flew more missions. 105 was second to us, and then it dropped down to F-100 as far as the fighter groups go. I think we lost, of the 445 F-4s, we lost 385 were to combat losses, other due to accidents or other stuff that happens. And I think I read where 100 of the 400 airplanes we lost in North Vietnam, it was 137 POWs. The rest are all killed. All the other guys were killed.
And it's just amazing. You think of those numbers. We've got military experience. You know, we worked in a squadron for anywhere from 18 to 24, flyable airplanes at any time. But to hear those numbers, and it was getting to you, obviously, it's just unimaginable. And people are inside those airplanes. And when we talk about numbers, even with the experience that we have, and then think about people that don't have military experience, it's hard to quantify that in your head of what that really means.
And think of all expensive. I mean, the money that was left up there with pieces of airplanes and people's lives and stuff. I'm firmly believe. I'm not going to get political. I firmly believe if our country's leadership would have turned us loose in '65 to do what we were trained to do, about 50,000 guys wouldn't have got killed. I really believe that.
Yeah, I hear that quite a bit.
If you ever want to, I don't know if the name H.R. McMaster means anything to you, but he was one of Trump's first DNIs or something. He's a retired Air Force Army general. And I don't agree with a lot of things he said, but when he was going to the Army War College as a lieutenant colonel, he wrote a book called Dereliction of Duty, and it was about McNamara and leaders at that time. And if you want to get a sick feeling in your stomach, read that book. It's not pretty, but it gives you a really good view of what was going on. So anyway.
So how many times have you guys sat down, and has he relayed some of these things that you're talking about now? Have you heard, is this the first time you've heard some of that stuff?
Yep. It is.
Okay.
I've asked, right? And so then you don't push it.
We didn't have enough margaritas at that time in order to get into those subjects.
Well, it is early in the day here, but we are on the premises of the Hog House, so everything, all's fair in love and war, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but that's very common. You mentioned Costco, when veterans see each other, then they start talking. And I one example here, I've got a Vietnam vet that I interviewed from our church, Al Sandvig, and that one got a lot of views early on because I described that we went to church together for 33 years so far, and I think I heard him say 33 sentences. And there's other guys that I interviewed in the church where they did some of the GI Bill schooling together, and they're getting together all through the decades and stuff, and they, even in that tight group, didn't relay very many of the stories. So once Al Sandvig got on and we started talking, and it just rolled on, and it rolled even more when he found out I went to the same SEER school stuff, similar to him. And the word was getting around the county here that Al talked, kind of deal. So one of the ladies in church says, yeah, that email link, that's going all over the place.
Well, I belonged to a group called the Red River Valley Fighter Pilot Association, and the Red River was, when you went to North Vietnam, the way we always went in, Call the Red and you're inbound. Well, that became our organization. And you go to those reunions and hear some of the damnedest stories, but you never hear them again until Gulf War I. And then it started coming out in my mind that of stories and stuff you never heard before. I mean, because at that time it felt like the country was behind the military, and it's been more that way the last 40 years or 30 plus years. But anyway.
Right, and it's gotten to be more and more now that generally speaking, the public appreciates the military and what they do a lot more, and that also has made it surface with the Vietnam vets, and they're finally getting welcomed home properly because of that.
Remember, he didn't tell you that he went to the desert twice, 2 different units, or 3 times.
Twice.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yep.
Oh.
Why don't you go ahead and relay some of your experiences with that before we move back into some of the pictures and stuff that your uncle has.
So, kind of timeline-wise, I was in the South Dakota unit until about 95, where work-wise I was overnight 6 months, literally over the year. So I said, getting a guard drill is really tough. So I got out. And then I moved to Indiana, where my wife is from, and around 2006, 2007, I said, I was working at a job at a college, and I'm like, hey, I could maybe get back in. And then you kind of read some of the lone survivor type stuff going, well, I can fix an airplane. If all those guys really needed was an airplane, I can fix an airplane. So the closest to where I was at was Battle Creek. So I went up to Battle Creek and was talking with the recruiters there, and they go, hey, there's a couple of guys from the South Dakota unit here. It's Mike Vanderwolde and Todd Toohey. And I went, well, I went to school with Todd Toohey and Mike Vanderwolde. Heck, I ran track with his brother Ed, now General Ed, right?
Retired, yeah.
and his sister was the same age as I was, and we did swim team and stuff together, and younger brother Tony. So
And with Mike, rest his soul,
yeah,
passed away a few years ago.
Yep. So that's how I got introduced into A-10s, and I was in the mock up there for about a year and a half until they said, we're going to take the A-10s away from Battle Creek and we're going to move them to Selfridge. So I said, well, I don't really want to drive to Detroit. So I got into the Fort Wayne unit, and they had F-16 Block 25s. And then they rotated in Block 30s, and then we ended up with the A-10. So after we got in with the A-10, that's when finally, when we all got spun up, about 2014, we went over to Afghanistan, to Bagram, to shut down the flying for the A-10 flying out of Bagram and to cover some of the Army's withdrawal. And all we got to do there besides getting shot at, all we really got to do was drop one bomb for a blue-on-blue incident with one of the Afghans wanting to get his buddy out and holding a gun to one of our guys' head on the ground. So once we shot that down, we got redeployed to Kuwait. And so that was 2014, kind of the end. And that was kind of different because we got to work out of tents. Most of us had to live out of a tent. We got to stand up the base there at Al Jabber because they had torn it all down in 2011. So we got over there. We got to kind of set our stuff up. We got to use some of our carpentry skills, build things, and set up your own base. And Big Air Force was gone, and we thought that was heaven, right? And it was kind of cool because you were there with the Canadians with F-18s. They were in the fight there against ISIL because somebody up in Canada read a post about one of a military member and killed him. So Canada was there with their F-18s. We had the Danes there with Block 15 F-16s. And then later on, the Italians came in with Tornadoes. So we were flying out of there with A-10s. We got our planes turned, ready to go. First mission up, both planes come back Winchester. 100% hit rate. And the Canadians started complaining that they weren't going to have any more targets now that the A-10s were in town. But the pilots were doing like 9-hour ASDs, 9.5 hours. So that's your average sortie duration. They were flying from Kuwait way up north there and coming back, and those were some really, really long flights. That's when I said, maybe I'm glad I didn't do the pilot thing, because sitting in that A-10 for 9.5 hours and not being able to move, they took 8 bottles of water with them, 4 piddle packs. They came out, with piddle packs.
Yeah, my career field was working on the equipment and fitting it to them and stuff. And we had, and as time went on, equipment got a little more intricate fit, little tighter. And there was guys that were just coming back with just sores on their nose from the mask and things. And, depending on your altitude, you got to keep that thing on. Those are very long. And the F-16 cockpit, which is what I have experience in, is a ways smaller than that A-10 also.
Yeah, the A-10, they kind of like that because they could get up and kind of move around just a little bit. I remember what he always told me. He says, well, if you fly a fighter, if you fly a heavy, you can go to the bathroom. if you're in a fighter, there's not that much room there.
Yep, for sure.
But
Rick, did you go overseas?
I did, just on not during combat periods. But yeah, I was overseas. It was over in England for 30 days. We did a rotation, took the whole wing. So it was Sioux
Really?
City and Des Moines and South Dakota Guard. We went over there and flew, and we did missions flying with the different countries up there, NATO type activities and all that. So that was one of the trips overseas. Man, I'm trying to remember some of the other places with the South Dakota Guard. That's the one of the main one. But most of the other deployments I had were, I wouldn't count Canada as overseas,
Sure.
But into Canada and around the U.S. mainly.
Yeah, pretty much standard traveling with an air guard unit. And a lot of times they're fun places to go. Because you usually get some time off. You can go see some things, do some things. And then once 911 hit, a lot of that changed.
Yeah.
Of course, and we get into the 20-plus years of things going on.
One thing, you asked me a question about how refueling, how long we could go between refuelings.
Sure.
On a normal mission, it took off, and every flight had its own tanker. And you'd go up, and there'd be tankers and airplanes all over. Then you'd go down and drop down and head for North Vietnam. And if everything went well, you came back and you got back on that same tanker to get enough gas to get home. You couldn't do up and do the mission and get back without refueling somewhere.
Right.
So you had to do that, and so that was because you had all those bombs and stuff, and your drag coefficient went way high. Once you got rid of them, well, they were okay, but you still used a lot of gas. And you had to be very, very careful how much afterburner you used, too, because that really sucked it.
Yeah, fuel management is huge.
Yep.
Especially when I've said it before. I heard it years ago with the F4. The guy said if you put enough thrust on a brick, it would fly too.
Yeah,
So you used a lot of fuel.
They said turn fuel into noise.
Yeah, well, you've got some books here. And we'll try to make it so maybe we can move your water, use your glasses if you need to.
I need to.
And you can just have the book there, but I'll put the pictures up on the screen, but you can kind of point to them and tell us what you're seeing there, what you remember.
Well, this is just a picture of me, and we had when we came back from Southeast Asia the first time. One of the guys made up this squadron, kind of like an annual, but it just is pictures. And this one here I'm not too proud of, but I am kind of proud of it. And my flight commander was a mobility officer for our squadron. And when he and his backseater left Thailand, went back to the Philippines before the rest of us did, because he had to mobilize the squadron. Well, when we got to Cam Ranh Bay, it was all tents and outdoor johns, no hot water, anything like that. They didn't tell me about that in our OTC. That's what the Army guys are supposed to do. But he got 2 footlockers of Rose Matus wine on the 130 and brought it into Cam Ranh. And we ate in mess tents and the mess kits and stuff. And so we would go to the mess tent and drink our wine with our food, and all the other people in the squadron be sitting there looking at us because we had wine and nobody else did. And but that night I think I had a little bit too much. All these others, just me in front of F4 here. This is my aircraft commander. Let me go back a page. That's him there. He was a Navy guy that was in my squadron, and he was my front seater, and he wouldn't be proud of those two pictures there either. So I better not show him much. But
No.
but his name was Leo Unzicker. He was born and raised in Nebraska, and that's him there. And we were just kind of sitting around, getting brief there for something. I don't know, but that's just it for that tour. This is nothing formal, just kind of a memento type thing.
Well, it's kind of cool that they made that because you guys probably weren't running around with cameras much around
Oh
and
no,
documenting
no.
your experiences.
Some guys are really into cameras did, but I never was. No, I never was there or anything like that. And
Mm-hmm.
The F4 was we didn't have raw gear, we didn't have flares, we didn't have everything we did when we went north was eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't have a lead computing gun sight like the D model did or anything like that. And it was just a basic airplane, really.
Right. Let's go through this one a little bit.
Well, this is kind of a memento book that I've made of myself, which first pages here are a list of the POWs that came back from Hanoi on Operation Homecoming. And I think there was 591 total, of which there was 35 civilians and a few government people. But there was, out of the military ones that came back, 335, I believe, were Air Force. And I knew about 30 of them. So that was a good day. And like I said, I was on a mission when Jim Hibner and Tom Barrett got shot down on the 5th of October of '65.
So the far left column was the date that they were shot down.
The day they got bagged, yeah. And it goes on down. The last shoot down was, just before the war ended on December 28, '72. And so, yeah, one of the guys.
There's another column on when they came back.
Yes,
date?
the release date, yes.
Release date.
Release date, yeah. Like Everett Alvarez, he was the Department of head of Veterans Affairs under Reagan. And in 1987, they designed a POW medal. And so we were in D.C. for a reunion, and so they had a ceremony in the East Garden, or one of the gardens. It wasn't Rose Garden, and they awarded first POW medals to somebody they could find from every war, and Everett got the one for ours. And I got my wife and I got to go to that meeting, or that presentation, because of my good friend from flying school who got shot down in January '67 and spent 6 years and 3 months up there. And so we got to go, and it was really good ceremony. But the best part was seeing Reagan speak. Mm-hmm. You can go back and find that speech on YouTube, and it was good. It was really good. Mm-hmm. He was quite a good.
And you said the two guys that got shot down during the mission you were on, they're like number 35 and 6 or so.
Yeah, of the total shoot downs
on that list.
Yeah.
And the other 30 guys that you said you knew, you've seen them since?
Most of them, yeah. Okay. Well, it's a funny story about a guy named Spike Naismith and Ray Salzarillo. I was a duty driver. One member said days I had additional duty, so I was a duty driver one day in early September '66. I think it was the 6th of September. And I drove to cruise the airplane. Spike was a front seater, and Ray was a back seater, and talking all that stuff, and go out, and they don't come back. And found out that a SAM went right through the airplane, right behind the back seat. And Ray was killed, we found out later, and Spike never ejected. He just found himself floating in his parachute. He doesn't know what happened. But wow. I didn't see him for years until we were in D.C. for a reunion. And we're standing at the elevator, and he was a real character. He kept the guys laughing up there. But anyway, we're standing waiting on the elevator. No doors open, off comes Spike, and Spike looks and he said, "Gil, He said, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have got shot down.
Oh, man.
I've driven to the airplane.
There's a greeting for you.
Loser.
But anyway, he's a good guy. He's still alive. This picture here is just me the day on 13th of December, 66, after I got back from a 100th mission. And that mission turned out to be almost 8 hours. It was supposed to be just a short one over to Route Pack 1, drop bombs, come home, make a 100 mission pass. Well, we got airborne and they diverted us for rest cap, and we ended up spending almost 8 hours. But that's why there's a little bit of sweat and stuff. That might be champagne. I don't know.
One question. You flew in here because you're in this area.
No, we live in Colorado.
Oh, you live in Colorado. Okay, that's what I was wanted trying to find out. Do they do the honor flights over there?
Oh, yeah, I've been on many of them.
That should be a nationwide thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I've been on 7 or 8. They make you quit there supposedly when you're 70, but I made some. But I went to about 76 before I quit. But yes, I got some good stories about that too. Oh man, if
You bet. We can go into whatever you want to when you want to.
No,
We have no time limit.
but this, he's got to go to Nebraska or go home. This is kind of funny way it's laid out. This I don't know what you're. Well, I can just. This is Dick Stoltz. On the left is my back seater for 65 of the missions, and then Tom Hirsch is the background there. And I don't know if you ever heard about Bolo, but that's when they designed to make F4s look like 105s and fly 105 profiles, and they shot down 7 MiGs right at the 1st of January, 67. He got one of the MiGs that day out. He was in my squadron.
Nice.
And this is just Stoltz and I again standing there and being happy. I guess he's happy because he doesn't fly with me anymore. I don't know. I did, well, I don't want to tell a story. Anyway, that's Dick and I again. This is my flight here. When first, we were really short of aircraft commanders when I got there, and that's why I got to fly so much. But we only had 3 aircraft commanders for a long time. A captain and another, Joe Hicks and I, we both checked out in the front seat, but he was a 62 graduate of the academy. Then we got Fred Cooper came in, so we had a major and a captain and 2 first lieutenants. But then we had all these backseaters. And backseaters were kind of in high demand because all the wing staff that flew didn't have a crew member. So the wing commander, the DO, Chappie James, Robin Olsen, Chappie James, and the squadron commander and the squadron ops officer, and those people, and other wing staff that flew didn't have backseaters, so you always had to have some extra backseaters for them to fly with. And it was not good for them because they didn't know how the guys, how good they were and what to expect and all that stuff. And it was not a fun time for them. I felt sorry for them, really did. That's just me in front of an old F4 with some AIM-9s. Robin Olds, I mentioned him. He was the wing commander, came in. The first wing commander I had, and I got to U-Bahn in 66, you couldn't get him to fly. He's like a seagull. He wouldn't fly through stones at him. Robin comes in, and nobody knew he was coming. He just shows up. Ace in World War II. He's like 41 years old there, and it seemed like he was old. But anyway, he came in. He got the night fighters up, and everybody had to come to this wing briefing room. And he said, "You guys don't think you're the best fighter pilot in the world? You're not, because I am." And whoa, that got our attention. And he
Wouldn't
was good.
expect anything less.
I got to lead him on a couple flights as a first lieutenant, which was nice. He wanted to know how in the world I got in the front seat so fast. I had to go through all that stuff. This is my back seater. I getting off the airplane. I don't know which day that was. And that's about it. Oh, and there's some other pictures of Robin back here, the 50th Union of the Air Force and stuff. Rob and I were good friends, and since I live in Colorado and I was bachelor for many years, he lived in Steamboat Springs. I had a couple other friends up in Steamboat, so I'd go up and ski with them a lot, which was a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Yeah, and that's about it. Just some citations. and
Yeah,
stuff.
that's some cool stuff. Yeah.
It's too bad we don't have that character that you have at your house that Dick drew.
Yeah.
I wish we could take a picture of him and put it into it, but he's got characters of the missions and the flying. My favorite one out of all those is they're in the plane, you got the bubbles going down, and Dick goes, "Gil, you know where we're going?" And Gil goes, "Yeah, I know where we're going. I just don't know how we're going to get there."
Stoltz is an artist, and he could say what he's talking about. He sat down this big sheet of paper at our kitchen table back in, I was looking at the other day before we left. I think it was 2003, and he had a picture of North Vietnam line and North Vietnam, and then he went through and drew all this stuff. Some of it he made up. I have to admit, he made some of it up, but that probably wasn't one of them. And he was. But anyway, after you want to hear any more about Vietnam? I don't know what.
Any specific missions you'd like to relay to us?
No. I guess the hairiest one for me was I was number 2 in flight of 4, and it was a miserable day. And the flight lead had taken the battle damage, and number 3, who was a deputy flight lead, lost his radio. Number 4 man had never been downtown before, so I was hit. And I was lucky enough to be able to get the flight reorganized. I headed, remember I said, go to the water if you could?
Yeah.
We were headed east, so I took the flight east, and we got on an emergency tanker. I got on the tanker with less than 3 minutes of gas left. And I had the only good airplane, well, number 4, but he was eyes were wide.
New guy.
But yeah. And
Wow.
so we got all 4 airplanes back. Other missions, you just got shot at and stuff, and lucky to avoid them and stuff like that.
Were you able to avoid all, or did you ever be in an airplane that got hit at all?
I never had an airplane that I led into North Vietnam get hit, nor did I ever take a hit. And that's probably more luck than skill, because I only had 165 hours in the airplane when I checked out as aircraft commander, and less than 200 I went to Southeast Asia. And that was really low time in those days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, that's a blessing.
yeah,
That's what that is.
that,
I don't know if that's luck, but it's definitely a blessing.
I'll take it.
Yeah, for sure. And you spent some time in Thailand, you're saying?
Yeah, that's where the Triple Nickel is based. We
Yeah.
flew out of Thailand.
That's where that one was.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
cool. So you guys learning some stuff over there?
Oh, yeah.
Had a couple interesting experiences in Germany. When I got there, I was, of course, again, the youngest aircraft commander, and they didn't believe when I came in, but a bunch of my friends were there already, and they said, oh, yeah. Well, they wouldn't let me fly in the front seat because they had back seaters outrank me, and they'd put me in the back seat. And on the scheduling board, I'd race my name and go home. So finally, they let me fly. I said, I can fly and all that stuff. So we went to Germany. Our primary mission in Germany was tactical nuclear alert. This was during the Cold War.
Right.
This was a long time ago. And the first thing that I really remember vividly from Germany was squadrons would go down to Huilas Air Force Base at Tripoli, North Africa. Once every third month, we had 3 squadrons on the base, and every third month we'd go down there for gunnery. And they decided on the 3rd of June of '67, I had just made captain, see if I could lead a flight. So you're going to be able to go to the range out the frickin' desert. Take off, turn north, go west, turn, and you're there. So we're sitting in the Army area, first flight of the day, 6 o'clock in the morning, and beautiful clear day, and the ground control said all flying out of Huilas has been canceled. And I had my flight commander, squadron operations officer, and somebody else in my wing, and I thought somebody was trying to pull a fast one. We had no way to verify it and no CACs or anything with us. So I asked Huilas Ground to verify that call, and they said, okay. And they said, call your squadron. So I called the squadron. They said, command post called, said, all flying's canceled. So I flashed my landing light, and the maintenance guys come over and said, what do you need? And I said, safe them up, we're going back to Chocks, flying's canceled. He said, what? I said, all I'm telling you is what I was told. So they came back and safed them up, put the pins in and all that stuff. And by the time we got back into the operations, the word had gotten out that the Israelis had attacked Egypt for the 7-day war. And scrambling to get airplanes out of North Africa, because who knew what the Libyans were going to do? Is before Gaddafi took over. He used to come to the bar and drink with us, believe it or not, when he was a captain. But I'm serious. Yeah, he did. But you have never seen so many airplanes get reconfigured so fast. The airplanes that happened to have guns on the center line, they just left them on. The airplanes that didn't have anything on the center line, they hung a center line tank on, pumped up gas, and we took off. You had to leave IFR, and you're reporting the wrong altitudes. You're reporting, and somebody would break off and go to Spain. We went to Aviano, Italy. It just, because we couldn't get back with the configuration we have all the way back to Germany. And I thought at that time there was going to be more happen than did. But that was the one thing I remember about Germany. The second thing, and you all will never remember this, I know that, but in mid-August, and I'm saying the 15th to 20th of August or something like that in there, of 68, the Russians invaded Czechoslovakia and overthrew Dubček. And all of our targets for tactical nuclear alert were in East Germany and Czechoslovakia. So every F-4 or every fighter that's capable of carrying a nuke in England, Germany, Spain, every airplane that could carry a nuke had a nuke loaded on them, and everybody was assigned a target. And the guys that were on Victor Alert, they had beds, and they had nice alert. The rest of us had to sleep on the floor in squadron operations. And for about 3 days, I thought we were going to start dropping those, scared to death. It was, and I'll never forget that as long as I live. And there was no joking going on in the squadron or anything like that. It was dead serious. And one thing I'll always remember about the nuclear mission, and I don't think this is classified anymore, it was never intended for the fighters to take off and go right their targets. It was intended to get airborne and go to an orbit point and hold until you got your release message. And so when you're at your orbit point, you had fuel considerations. Of course, there weren't going to be any tankers. So you had R fuel and D fuel. And R fuel was enough to leave your orbit point, go to your target, drop your bomb, complete your escape maneuver, and come back to a base somewhere in the eastern part of the FRG and land, which probably wouldn't be there anyway because it's been blown up already. D fuel was enough to leave your orbit point, you go to your target, drop your bomb, complete your escape maneuver, and then flame out, and you were supposed to bail out. Mm-hmm. So it was a one-way mission. And that got our attention. We always had to plan for that. We had to brief our missions from the wing staff about once a year. We had to know them by heart. You had to know every turn, everything. And then if you were going to do this and go to war and drop that, once the backseater got the radar locked on and everything onto the target or the offset point, whatever he had, then he had this special mask he put on that would reflect all the blast going off around. And front seater, when they had to fly the airplane and drop the bomb, and then as soon as he lost his eyesight, do the flashes, and the back seater was supposed to fly him back.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a solid plan, right?
Yeah. I remember working on the heavies and heavy aircraft, and way back in the day, you had these goggles that had like a gold tint on the front for like nuclear flash blindness, and one eye patch. So you would wear that eye patch, and when this one got exposed and ruined, then you take the eye patch off and hopefully fly the rest of the way home. Yeah, we've advanced.
Yeah, with no depth perception, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of pilots flying. Airline pilots flying nowadays with only one eye.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like driving with one eye. You just get used to it.
Yep, you get used to it.
I did, did I tell you I got in the South Dakota Guard as a pilot?
Just mentioned it, but I want to hear more.
In July 1970, when I got off active duty, my goal was fly for the airlines because I was a reserve officer and I was never going to get promoted. And so, in late '69, all the airlines started furloughing. So I'd promised my wife we'd come back to South Dakota, had 60 days terminal leave that we got paid for, come back to South Dakota for a month, and then her parents lived in Tucson. We'd go there for a month, then look for a job. Well, then things got dicey, and so I dressed up in my sport coat and tie and drove down to Sioux Falls and walked in, and I introduced myself to sergeant was standing there, and I said I was looking for see if I could get a job as a pilot. And he said, well, I'll take you into whoever it was. I don't remember who it was.
Oh, I was hoping you did.
I got
a few names in my head.
This is 1970. I mean, my God, how long ago is that? But I introduced myself, and he said to me, well, we are hiring pilots. He said, but first of all, why would you like to get in this unit? I said, well, I was born and raised, and I told him all my life story. So, okay. He said, well, we're only interviewing people that are current and or have been qualified in F-100, F-105 pilots or front seat F-4 people. I said, I've never flown an F-100 or 105, but I got 1,200 hours as aircraft commander in F-4. He looked at me and said, you got your gunnery records? I said, yes, sir. And I handed it to him, and he said, when do you want to start school? Oh, that was in process. They were transitioning from Deuces to the F-100s at that time. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, I had promised my wife that we'd use my terminal leave, and I said, we're going to leave here, South Dakota, in the next week or so and go to visit her folks. And he said, where do they live? And I said, Tucson. He said, perfect. I said, perfect? He said, yeah. He said, when you get ready to swear in, call me, we'll send a T-Bird down, pick you up, fly back, swear you in, fly you back down, and you can start F-100 school and just live with your in-laws. And I said, well, he's got it all planned out for me. And then he says, do you have a job? We get about 2 years of active duty and stuff with your drill and all that. Do you have a job? And I said, no. And he said, just a minute. He said, I'm going to call a guy at the phone company. He called up some guy, I don't know, Jim or whatever his name was, and he said, I've got one here for you. I have a job for him. He said, yeah. And he said, you got a job at the phone company? And I said, oh, okay. I guess that's better than farming. But then while I was down in Tucson, I got hired by Eastern Airlines, and I called him up and said I was going. He said, well, you get ready to check out, call back. Well, I got in the Montgomery Garden, and that was it.
Nice.
But it would have been fun to fly back home in
Wow.
this unit. He would have. Phil Killey, did you ever know Phil Killey?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was a class behind me in flying school.
Yep.
His health is really bad right now.
It is. Yeah, I've been seeing some stuff on Facebook. Actually, our new operations building that went up in like 07 or so is dedicated to him.
It is.
Got his picture and a plaque right up front there.
Yeah, I've known him for a long time.
That was the first pilot I launched in an A7 was Phil Kelly when he
Really?
was the colonel. Yep. He took off. He had all of his bombs. He came back with all of his bombs. And then the A7 on the left-hand side, there's this switches you're supposed to hit to have. He didn't have that right. I had no idea what was going on, and we were at a Citibank picnic with John Lose, and because he worked there at that time, and Russ Larson, and Kelly shows up with his wife. And so I said, on your flight, I said, you went up with, all your bombs and came back with all your bombs. Did I do something wrong? Russ Larson was hiding under the table going, you don't ask guys questions like that. He was pretty straightforward. He goes, no, I just didn't have these switches set right. And that's what it was. You didn't do anything wrong. Like, okay.
Yeah, this goes back a little ways, but Justin Berger, he was the second commander of the Air Guard, I believe. Just as a side note, I'm getting ready to hang something more in the hog house, and it's elk antlers that Justin Berger he had shot the elk, didn't want the elk, and Bob Jameson,
Yep.
and he was hunting with him. So Bob's son, Jammer, Matt Jameson, good friend of mine, he retired out of the Guard, pilot and the whole bit, and he was cleaning out a shed of his dad's because Bob had passed away, found these elk antlers, and knew the story
That's
behind.
good.
They were stored for like 50 years in that shed. So I'm going to be hanging those up. I'm going to make a plaque, so that people
Good.
that see that notice. So I didn't know if you had met either of those guys or not.
Did you know Bill Ball?
I've heard the name.
Bill was a year ahead of me in high school, and his dad ran Ball Aviation out at the airport. He flew in the Guard for quite a few years. He's deceased, died about 3 years ago. But
That was the first F-16 I saw flying as he came up. We were playing war games. I was on top of an A7 doing my thing, and it was the day before, and he dropped it right down on the deck and buzzed us real fast because I think he was in the Arizona Guard, wasn't he?
I don't know.
Who was that you said?
I
Ball.
don't.
Yeah,
Okay, that guy.
he was Red Air at that time, and I just remember him just dropping on the deck and came
I didn't know.
flying right over us.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
But
Because Shane Ball was from Huron, and he was also a crew chief. So, yeah, that's my uncle.
Yeah. Rick, what did you think about it when we were playing war games, as he puts it, getting ready for inspections, how we would conduct war?
Yeah,
What'd you
I
think of those?
went through a number of those.
Yeah.
They were always interesting and fun. There's a meme, I don't know if I can describe it, where it's a road that talks about, it's a gravel road, then it turns into this really nice asphalt road, and it's a gravel road, so it's ORI after the ORI type of thing. But yeah, those were always eye-opening. I remember the very first one vividly that we did, where we got the call to flush the bombers, right? And so all the A7s, we had to button them up as they were, and this was prior to Terry joining, and then send them all off. And that was one of the weekend things that was kind of eye-opening, to say the least, of, okay, this is real.
Yeah, all the older exercises ended with you flushing the aircraft, and you're saying, okay, so we get to handle the nuke.
Yeah, but I mean, you practice for all this stuff. The repetitions of practice have made it natural. I remember, I don't know if it was during an exercise or it was just one of the standard ones where he was new and we were doing an integrated combat turn. And so we're loading the bombs, doing all these sorts of things. And Terry's on one side of the plane and needs to get to this side of the plane. Well, he barrel rolls underneath the tail end of the A7. And you remember that one?
Yeah.
And then back up. And the safety officer standing there going, I can't believe he just did that.
He goes, everything looked great, but that barrel roll, I almost bought that. But that was part of the combat turn. That's not part of the combat turn.
I got kind of a funny story from the guard down in Montgomery. When I got in, we had RF-84s, then we got RF-4s almost immediately. And it was a cold January day, and it can get cold in the South. And I lived about 2 hours from Montgomery, and with the hour time change from Georgia to Alabama, I could leave an hour, I could leave home at 6:45, be there and easy for an 8 o'clock brief. So it was cold, windy day, and low clouds, and it was just miserable. And I get to the squadron, I walk in, and there we got a flight of 4 scheduled. And Recce doesn't fly a lot of four-ship formations unless it's a refueling. And then usually after refueling, you break off on flights of 2 and go do your thing. And so I said, what's going on? I said, well, this was last time that George Wallace got elected governor. And they said, you're leading the flyby for George Wallace's inauguration speech. And I said, oh, okay. And they gave me a TOT. And I said, all right. So we briefed the flight and took off and got above the clouds and went up for one of our MOAs and practiced some diamond formation, which we normally didn't fly, and things like that. And pretty soon I get a call on guard from Montgomery Approach. They said to call my squadron. So I called the squadron up, and they said, things have changed. And I said, what do you mean? He said, they want you there now. I said, now? And they said, well, now, not really, but as soon as you can be there, they want you there. No more TOT. I said, ooh, this is going to be fun. So I called back on Montgomery Approach, and I had talked to them on the ground and told them where I wanted to get vectored to because I knew I couldn't find it. Like I got below the clouds, somewhere near it. And so they got me below the clouds, and there was a street I wanted, led right to the Capitol. And so I had those guys in diamond formation, and we had, 8 J-79s, and the ceiling was about 1,000 feet, solid. We were at 500 feet doing 480 knots, and we came screaming down the street right over the top of the Capitol and went our little way, and then got clearance and got back above the clouds, and then took approaches back into Montgomery. Well, I got to the maintenance debrief, and all the maintenance guys were just laughing like heck. And I said, what's so funny? And he said, well, the governor was speaking, and he said, all of a sudden we heard this big roar. It was deafening. I said, what is that? And then finally, we've realized it's you guys. And he said, as the sound went away, he said, my, they're sure flying low today.
Man. When you were in Vietnam, were you able, did you leave base much, go out amongst the civilians?
At Cam Bay, no. There was nowhere to go. We went to the beach a lot because it was a beautiful beach, and we went there quite frequently. And but at Newbon, yes, we would go off base frequently, take a one baht cab ride down to town and eat and stuff like that. And,
yeah. Did you have any experiences down there or anything that surprised you?
A lot of guys did, but I didn't.
Yeah.
He's married.
Mm-hmm. No. Okay. Got me. Whoa. Yeah, usually, sometimes when I ask that, they talk about things they saw at the food market when they're walking through and stuff. That's first I've had that one. How about you, Terry? You've been overseas when you've gone amongst the civilian-
natives,
What did
yeah.
what did you
Well,
experience?
so
of some
like
of
when
that?
we were in Kuwait, we finally got to go into town, and it was kind of like when you're on the farm. Hey, you get to go into town. This is a big trip. And so you go into downtown Kuwait City, and they load us up with our one guy driving us in a van full of people, and we get down to the mall where we're allowed to go, and we're out there. One of our guys he's sitting there kind of doing this thing, hiding behind a lamppost. I go, Bird, what are you doing? He goes, we got to kind of blend in. I said, I'm a 6-foot white guy in the middle of Kuwait. I'm not blending in. I don't blend in on the south side of Chicago. What are you doing? But it was kind of nice to get out, get around, and then we kind of ended up in a part of town where we went and got ice cream. It was a car show. It was a car show of the most expensive automobiles on the planet that you could own, that all of these Kuwaitis are driving around to go get ice cream in. So we were just sitting there with our jaws taking pictures of all of these awesome cars. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of cool to see that.
Right. How about you, Rick? What
Yeah.
experiences have you leaving base in some of your travels?
England was the best because we got to, we were at RAF Waddington, and we'd go down to Lincolnshire, if I remember the city correctly, and it was a walk. So we'd walk down after the flight operations ended for the day, and we got to befriend a pub that served cold beer. And I remember the locals there were just, all over the owner going, this beer, it's too cold. I don't know how you can tolerate it. He goes, look, the Yanks are in town. They're going to pay this pub off. When they leave, we'll warm it up, right? But no, they had really, really good fish and chips, and which are,
A lot of vinegar, though.
yes,
As
a lot of
opposed
vinegar.
to ketchup.
Yeah. But grilled ham and cheese, they made a really good grilled ham and cheese, and I've kind of stuck with it ever since. But no, they were really good, and the people and learning about the thing of it is you go over there and learn about their culture, and everyone's always willing to talk about their culture, right? Here's how things work and those types of things. So it was always fun to learn that.
Yeah, when I was at Offutt, down there where SAC headquarters was at the time, we our life support unit, we had like 4 different bases where we had like chem gear stashed, and I went over there. My boss, the superintendent of the shop, kind of took a liking to me. So I was a young guy, but he took me on the trip over there. So we had went over in a RC-135s, the one with the long nose recon, and we were going over there to give a class on the Plitz goggles, which is a nuclear flash blindness, up from the generation I was talking about, where, it would sense the light and it would shut the lenses off for you. So we had to do a half-a-day class on that, do about a day and a half inspection on the aircrew chem gear that we had. And then we had to wait another 10 days for that plane to be going back. And my boss, he had met this guy from England that came over to the U.S., and he was a young farmer, and he wanted to see how the Yanks farm. So he traveled the country checking out all these farms and working on them. Well, he had met my boss when he was 18 years old. So we went to his place and stayed there for a while, and he was selling multi-million-dollar real estate now at this point in that guy's life. But it was the standard deal. You would eat your supper, and you'd go for like a half-mile walk after supper, hit every pub on the way back, and they were only about 200-300 yards apart, if that. And they were the small, and it was like you're referring to, the warmer beer, non-carbonated, and the taps weren't like pressurized taps; they were pumps.
Draws.
And they would draw the beer up from the basement there.
It's wonderful.
Oh yeah. And you were mentioning Germany earlier, and I was waiting for the word "the beer" to come out of your mouth, and it didn't yet.
Well, I lived in housing there after a while. We got on housing. When we came out of the war zone in 66, 67 time frame, you were able to take your dependents with you. If you were just coming over with You couldn't. But so we lived in the economy a while and then moved into housing. And I don't know if you ever had Beck's beer or not. I was stationed at Bitburg, and Bitburger Pils is a great beer. Oh, man, it's a good beer. But I had Beck's beer delivered to my door by the case for $1.80.
Nice.
Just like milk,
After
huh?
after the first time, you had to pay a deposit on the bottle.
Sure.
But after that, it was, they'd come by and leave a case, and it was, I weighed about as much as I do now then after a while. Loved the beer.
Yeah, like our first trip to Belgium for the unit, that was where we got good beer. We remember that. That was the best trip ever.
Was that the last time we were there?
First, 88.
88.
That'd have been when Clint Burt was like the flight chief, and we went there, and there was a carnival going on, and it was a blast.
Was the next
89,
one?
88, 89, somewhere in there.
Was the next trip to there like 3-4 years later?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's the one that I was on. I did one. I think it was the last one.
Yeah, that was the best trip. That would have been when Sean and Chris and those guys, that was like their first big trip. Mm-hmm.
I really
They
got
had a blast.
Yeah, it was fun.
There was a
First-
carnival going on when we got there. We just remembered pulling up into town and watching everybody scrubbing the walls. And we said, man, these people are really, really clean. And someone going and get fresh pastries and take them out to the flight line. And then that evening we found out why, because how Belgium's got the fountain of the guy pissing on the, that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody peed on the building. So that's why everybody was out there scrubbing off the whole place. But yeah, that was a blast. We worked hard, played hard, worked out of the revetments from the old days, lived in the old German World War II barracks.
Yeah.
Had some interesting trips with Kenny Carlson. Yep.
Had my first Stella beer over there and acquired a great love for shish kebabs
Yep.
right outside the gate, supper most every night. So when you returned, did you have any issues like with the public and all that stuff? Anything that you'd like to talk about? Or not? It's up to
Well,
you.
I don't like to talk about it, but I will. The only incident I had was when I came home. When we came home the first time, we came home by C-130A models. I don't know if you know the difference between an A1A model or any of the others, but the A model had three-bladed props that you couldn't sink. And so those four, it was, and we went from Cameron Bay to Clark, RON, Clark to Guam, Guam to Kwajalein, Kwajalein to Hickam, Hickam McClellan, McClellan McDill. That's and we overnighted in Clark and Guam, and 24 hours at Hickam, which was nice. McClellan and then McDill. And so that was the unit moved back. We left our jets there for the squadron to board these airplanes in. And so we landed McDill and there was nothing. But the second time we came back, we flew civilian charter, Pan Am charter, into Travis. And I was traveling with the majors in the squadron and myself. We were the only two officers. And the rest of the guys were enlisted guys coming out of the jungle. And they were wild, and I don't blame them. And so they had been debriefed in country, and we debriefed them on the airplane about what and what not to do, and told them that when we got, everybody's supposed to change into civilian clothes.
Right.
But San Francisco airport authorities were very smart. They only had one place the blue buses could drop you off. And so that's where the old protesters were. And when we got off the buses, it was ugly. Spit on you and do all kinds of things like that, just like you've read about. But once we got into the terminal and where our flights were to go, I was going back to Tucson, it didn't have that problem, but I did have that one incident there at San Francisco at the airport where we got off the buses. And we're coming out, everybody's short hair and got tans and all that stuff and like the Army guys. It was just awful. Just awful. But that's the only time.
Yeah, I think it was maybe Al Sandvik during his interview that he talked about the local people once he got into the local area. And he said the worst thing he got around here was just silence. So nobody was jamming on him or any of that kind of stuff. I thought that was an interesting the way he put it, that the worst he got, in his home area was silence.
See, but, when I came back, I went to Tucson. That's where my in-laws were, and that's a big military town. Then I came to South Dakota and Carpenter. You know, they might have known you're gone, but we didn't see anybody, anything like that. And then I went from there right to Germany, and then on the base and stuff there. And the Germans, we saved their butt. So as far as people were alive then, but they had no problems over there. Some of the Army guys, remember that was during draft days also, when they started drafting people and because they're going to get enough volunteers. Some of the guys that came to Germany had a lot of trouble, but a lot of it was self-induced.
Yeah.
But I can't, other than that one incident, that's only one.
Good. Did you get any proper welcome homes or anything like that? And yeah.
I just come home.
Well, welcome home, sir.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate
Thank you for
that.
your service.
But just,
and I mean that with high regard. Nice. You bet.
yeah, no, it was just, no, there was nothing. And, you're coming into onesies and twosies. What you could do.
Right. So my guess is, based on our conversations, the 29th of March, you haven't attended any of the Vietnam Day like celebrations, meetings, any of that stuff?
We have a winter home in Arizona, and I've been to a couple down there. And I've been, like we talked about Honor Flight earlier, and I've been to quite a few of those get-togethers and stuff. But the Vietnam vets I associated with are all belong to that one group I told you about, and we're all getting old. And nobody can travel anymore. The next fall is going to be at Pensacola, Florida. Love to go, but not going to go. It's all the younger guys now, and you don't know any, but the people you want to see, you're going to see anyway.
Right.
That are still alive. And so.
Yeah. And you're still seeing them. That's what I like,
yeah.
what I heard just now, is making the effort to continue to get together.
And then these stupid phones with this FaceTime and all that, you can talk to anybody anytime you want to. Really,
Yeah.
If you don't mind. So.
Absolutely. Feel free to bring the mic a little closer to you, the two of you. I got questions for you.
Okay.
And we'll start with Terry there. What was one of the most rewarding things that you either did or experienced when in the military, or made you the most proud?
I remember that first set of missions when we got to Kuwait and the planes came back empty, because I was like, finally, we got to do our job, right? And I was pro souping at that time, so it was like getting everybody lined up, get the planes turned, get them ready to go again, and then just having that constant time of planes are going out, they're coming back empty. They're going out, they're coming back empty. We ran the AO, that whole region of the world out of munitions, just about. It was down to that point where we had to keep taking the loads back to QA to say, can they fly this? Because they were dropping whatever they could, and we were wondering when they were going to start throwing refrigerators on there and stuff. But they just kept coming back. The loads were changing depending on what was coming on, and it was just kind of rewarding because that's what you train for, right?
Right.
You always train, like Rick was saying, you always, from when you start, combat turn. We're going to do a combat turn right now. And that was cool to see that actually all work.
Was there any writing on the front of any of the bombs?
Well, there was people putting stuff on everything, that's
Yeah.
unofficial.
Some unofficial messages that you don't state right here, but yeah, that was kind of interesting seeing some of that.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. How about you, Rick? What's been some of the most rewarding things
I would say the people, right? I came back for Kenny Carlson, or not Kenny Carlson's, Larry Heinemann's retirement.
Oh yeah, just recent.
And the connections, it's just like you never left, even though we've been apart for a while. I think that's just really impressive of how well the people work together. And at Terry's retirement, his words really resonated with me. He goes, the reason I stayed in as long as I did was because of the people.
Yep.
And I think that's so true. You get out even in the non-military world, right? You get working with a group of people and you have good synergy and you work well together. It's a lot of fun. People will stay around and do things and are more committed and doing those types of things. In the military, it's a little bit different because your butt's on the line, right? You're going to help save others. You're going to help save yourself. Those types of things. So there's a little more to it. But to me, that's the most rewarding part of it is having those friendships, stay in touch with those people.
That's the key.
Yeah. And it gets, you get busy and it gets hard to stay in touch with people, but the ones that are special to you do stay in touch with them. So.
Yeah, you got to be the guy that makes stuff happen.
Somebody has to.
Yeah.
You bet. Now, you probably got a long list there, but what are some of the things you experienced where, and when I say proud, I'm talking about the healthy type of pride, not,
Well, I think my biggest, I go along with these guys and the friends. I mean, my best friends are the guys I knew in the military. Nobody high school, nobody college, anything like that. The guys are the best friends. But I think the proudest for me is being able to serve my country. And as a volunteer, I wasn't, there was no draft or anything. I volunteered, and the whole 30 years I spent, I could have gotten out basically any time after my initial commitment was up, but I stayed. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the work I did. Every assignment I had, I have good memories of. There's some things that were bad times, but you tend to forget those. I'm just glad I could do it. I'm glad I was physically qualified to do it. My parents weren't really happy when I did it.
that's pretty common.
Especially your mom.
My dad always thought I'd come back and farm, but I didn't. Not God rest their souls. I don't know how to say this. I'm glad I didn't. I was glad I was able to pursue the life and the career I did. Over almost 40 years in aviation is not a bad deal.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, that's civilian and military, of course, but it was great.
I remember Grandma sending you off, saying, "Now you boys always be good." And I go, "Well, we might not be able to be."
Do you have any words of advice for young people that may be thinking about going into the military and or aviation?
Yes, do it. If you got the means to do it, and even got the slight desire, you can go in and spend 4 years, which is nothing now. Let's say aviation. If you wanted to be, I think the Air Force now is a 10-year commitment to be a pilot. So you can go in and be a pilot for 10 years and get out when you're 31. Get on with the airline. Every airline's hiring. You fly to your 67 now, so you get over a 45-year career flying, and you can still get in the Guard unit for next 10 years to get your retirement if you want to, or spend longer than that because everybody's hiring. And I wouldn't hesitate to do it all over again.
Yeah.
I'd probably worked a little bit harder initial part of flying school, but
Right.
I learned my lesson there. But number 8 out of 45 isn't bad, really.
No.
So the part of the story that you were relaying with the nukes and no joking around the squadron stuff, about how old were you at that point?
26. Well, let's see. 68, I'd have been 27 in late 68, so I was 26.
Yeah, 26 years old.
Yeah.
That kind of pressure,
Yeah.
but also the amount of life that you lived in that period. So when
yeah.
when you're telling these young people to go ahead and go for it, look at the amount of experience in life up to being
it's
26,
phenomenal.
27 years old.
I
Holy
don't
cow.
disagree with that. You're right. It's a lot of life experiences in that short amount of time. And it was just the luck of the draw, the way it happened.
Right.
And,
Right.
The one thing I'd say to him is do it, because I'm coming up on 25 years at this small company called Microsoft, and I can tell you what, anytime we look for someone's career, if they spent time in the military, we're giving them second and third looks and discussing what they've done, how they've done it, because we know they're going to have good skills. They're going to have, most of them have a good work ethic. The ones that haven't been in there,
Right.
And they're going to be responsible, and that's that's a big thing. This they're leaders too. They end up being leaders, whether you want to be or not. You have to be to survive. So
Right.
So we're looking, when we hire people, that's one of the things we look at. So the lessons you learn prepare you for things in the future. It's
Yeah, because it doesn't take very long of being in the military that, just in a matter of even a few years, you can start finding yourself into the entry-level leadership positions.
Yeah. Well, Terry's talking about when he had that break in service and then went into Battle Creek, and we were chatting one time. I said, "So what's it like?" He goes, "It's not any different." He goes, "It's the same type of people, just they have different labels on their
Yeah,
uniform."
same cast of characters almost.
Yeah.
You go into a crew room, and I can tell you, there's going to be one guy here that could have his doctorate's degree. There's going to be one guy that just barely made it out of high school. There's going to be somebody that's doing the, that's always a smart apple, and there's always going to be fun to be had, and people pretty much just go get to work.
You're going to find that in the military where you're going to find strong people and weak people, and in the aviation, it's very important you find out who's weak early on, because if you don't, it could cost you down the road. And so it's a highly, I don't want to say this, you have to be at your top. Being a fighter pilot, I guess I want to say this, is not just being a pilot. It's having a personality that you are willing to make decisions, whether they're bad or good, and stick with them. You got to do it, and it's a mental thing also. And flying transports, which I've a lot of time doing that, is kind of boring sometimes. Being a fighter pilot. Now, I'm talking, like I say, back till I flew my last flight in 1981. Nowadays, I think it's probably a lot more mundane than it used to be. I really do.
Right. There's a lot more avionics involved with the jets, and it makes things safer and all that, but it does. And I've always said every job that anybody has, I don't care what it is, there's a certain amount of, just things that you have to do, certain things that could get, using your word, maybe a little boring in a part of it. And, I understand that.
So what all airframes have you flown?
You're kidding.
You're going to take your shoes off and count your toes.
Yeah, we got
You really want to know?
Yeah.
Well, I learned to fly in PA-18 out here, up there at State, with 37 and 38. And the F-4 is the only Air Force airplane I was ever qualified in. I did fly in the T-Bird some, because in the old days you had to get 4 hours a month to get your flying pay. And so during the transition from flying school to start flying the F-4, I had to fly in the backseat of T-Bird some. Civilian-wise, Electra, 727, DC-9, L-1011, 737 200s, 300s, 500s, 757s, 767s, 747 400s, and Airbus is about it.
About it. You see how he put that there?
Yeah, just
about
a
it.
couple of planes, just a couple.
Yeah, that is quite a career for sure.
It was, I can't complain, yeah.
Do you have any hobbies now?
Well, to be truthfully honest about recently, no, I've had a back issue for years, and I had back surgery the end of March, and it's the first time in about 5 years right now that I can walk without having some kind of a support.
Oh, wow.
So I'm just getting back into starting doing some exercise, walking and things like that. I'm up, well, till we came to South Dakota and eat every 20 minutes. I was up walking a little over a mile a day, which I hadn't done in years, and so that's my goal now, is to increase my walking, and I like to go to lap pool and walk in the water. But before I couldn't even get to the lap pool, let alone walk in it. So now I'm going to try to get back doing that.
That's great.
It's just
your hobby is rehab, and you're doing better now instead of a constant decline.
But going up and down those stairs, not pretty.
Yeah, yeah. You did it just fine, but you said it's not pretty going up and down, but you did very well based on what you've experienced.
But before we lived where we did now, we had a home on 10 acres in the mountains of Colorado. I had a tractor that's now in his place in South Dakota, up in Lake Ponset, and I did all kinds of stuff outside. But until my back went bad, I couldn't do it anymore. So.
Terry, what are your hobbies now?
I do woodworking and play hockey, and I like to go out and shoot guns, and work on trucks and stuff with Jim.
What was that he said?
I don't know. I can't.
Well, about skate sharpeners. But,
Yeah,
Oh, I helped him wire up
Skate
his skate
sharpeners.
sharpener.
help each other with projects.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah. How about you, Rick?
So woodworking's turned into one of my hobbies as well. I'm still working, so it's still taking up quite a bit of time. But then, as Lowell mentioned, a year ago, my wife retired from being an elementary principal, and we now live at Lake Ponset and built our retirement home out there on the lake. And so there's a community, surprisingly, a number of people out there from the Air Force.
Oh yeah.
That we've gotten together with, and then cornhole's become one of the big things. So now we year round because we
Competition.
we play cornhole, and it's kind of like being in the military and being on sports teams where the harassment's more fun than throwing the bags, So
Part of that camaraderie thing.
exactly.
Got to have a thick skin a little bit if you're going to have some fun. Gil, I got a question for you.
oh boy.
And if there's anything anybody wants to bring up or talk about, that's fine. But I think we're going to do this part right now. You've got kids, grandkids. I don't know. Do you have any greats yet?
No, I was married for 26 years through the pictures in here, and we had a daughter who was born in Germany, but she died of brain cancer in 71.
man.
So we adopted a girl in 76 who has, I don't know, she's dated, she's lived with guys and all that, but she's never wanted to get married, and she's a nurse practitioner, works in the neurological pain medicine center, center in University of New York, Rochester, New York, lives outside of town. And my now current wife had 2 children, and there's 6 grandchildren there, and then her daughter married a second marriage on and he had 2 children. So we got 8 grandchildren, step grandchildren. They call me grandpa.
Oh,
so
yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
And but none of them are old enough, or they're old enough, but they haven't gotten pregnant yet. There's 2 out of college, and then we got people graduating college every year for eternity, the way it looks. And but that's it.
Yeah, so you've got those people and your kids. So my point is, and this is part of why I do this, I love hearing people's stories. I love the camaraderie of people and interviewing a lot of military people and friends and South Dakota Guard people in particular lately. If there are kids way down in the future that you'll never meet, just figure there's about 40 of them sitting underneath that center camera there, so you can look at that camera lens and see them. What would you like to tell them?
Follow your dream.
I would tell them, find what you're passionate about
Yep.
and pursue it. And you're going to run into obstacles. Things going to slow you down. Don't give up. Persist.
Terry,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Besides what these guys already said, it's kind of that whole thing of it's okay to fail. It's okay to learn. Just don't do the same thing wrong twice in a row.
Or 3 times.
Right?
Fool
Because
me
that's
once.
kind of what the military is the best at. They put you on an airplane. Man, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Right? And
Fool
you're going
me
to make
once,
mistakes. and
shame
you're gonna
on
fail
you.
Forward.
Yep. Sorry, I interrupted you. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah.
I do have a pretty good, one of my favorite stories about having children and stuff. My best friend I met at McDill in 1965. he and his wife just celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary, and we went down to Arizona and attended it. And he has 3 daughters. Now, they got married in 55. And next year they had a daughter, and then 2 years later they had a daughter, and 3 years later they had another daughter. So I've seen these kids grow up. The oldest daughter is 67 now.
Wow.
60, and then they go down to, 65 and then 62. All 3 of them call me Uncle Gil. Mm-hmm. And every time they call up, they'll say, Uncle Gil, and that just warms my heart after knowing these kids all these years. And one of them, youngest daughter, said to her one time, says, how is Uncle Gil our uncle? And Leslie said, never mind, he is. So that relationship with that family has been unbelievable since those days. Unbelievable.
Yep. You got blended families. Yep. You've got friends that you get so close to that you have those terms of endearment. Mm-hmm. I think that's great. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, fellas.
Humor. You got to have humor.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you get back from basic training and you're an OJT at the guard base and your friend picks up the phone call and he goes, hey, Bergman, it's the Pentagon calling. Jeez, so you know what's running through your head. So I pick up the phone. It's Uncle here calling. So we chat, and then that immediately means we got to have a visit in the chief's office. Why is the Pentagon calling you?
Right. That's funny.
Yeah, I was working out on the flight line, getting my plane ready to go, and Bendinger, it's normally Lee Murdoch always is bouncing around the flight line and dancing his way around and doing things. He makes a beeline right for me. What did you do? What do you mean, what did you do? He goes, there's some guy from the Pentagon calling here, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to salute the phone or not. So find that out. So I go back to there talking, here it is at Calkin, and Bert comes out. You got to tell me things like this. You got to tell me you got an uncle to the Pentagon.
Yep. Clinton Burt, who's been on this with his daughter Deb as well, and Dinger, rest his soul. That was a sad funeral to be at there, and we've gotten to the point in our lives and people that we know where there's been more of them passing, and the one thing that I do like attending is the retirees coffee at the Alliance for the South Dakota retirees, Air Guard retirees, and in May when we have our meeting, the second Tuesday of every month, they read the names of everybody in the Air Guard that's passed. And I wasn't able to attend this last year, but it's pretty amazing to stand there. And I guess we said, it's a long list. 2 people take turns reading the names. But you hear these names and you think about things that you've done with them in the past and just all the stories, the good stories. We could go on forever with the relationships that we've had. And it's just great to remember those people, and it's great to live on and create more good memories like that. So it's kind of my thought on that.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else you fellows would like to discuss? I know we've been squirming on our chairs a little bit too and stuff here.
Pads for us old people. Yeah. But I've enjoyed this. I really have. What Terry brought up to me and sent me a link to your website and stuff. And I watched a couple of them. I think I watched the one with the Brigadier General and his son.
Yep. That was the very first one. And like we said, now is our 50th with you.
I didn't realize that was the first one, or I didn't miss that. And it's an honor to spend the time with these 3 young men. Well, they're getting old now. But
we're still younger than you. So.
And I was really looking forward to this, and I didn't really know what to expect or if I'd screw it up or whatever. So thanks for putting up with me.
Yeah. You bet. And I'm really and we were limited on days, because you're not local here and stuff. And then as we were talking about the Hog House, I'm thinking about I don't do a lot of midsummer Hog House Chronicles out there,
Yes.
but but I was glad that we could give you this glorious background for the number 50 podcast.
Might be your new look.
Yeah.
The thing we love is the ports back there and here with that air conditioner cranking on pretty good.
I'm
So.
going to go get some Olympia beer now.
Yeah, this is just, I mean, in the hog house itself, we're going to show you that out there. Besides what we've put out there, there's like over 170 donated items that people have left. So this one usually it hangs in the very back, the darkened out podcast studio. So that one's been on camera before, but when I'm walking around out there looking for things to put out here.
Yep.
And I'm glad we mentioned that. This flag, retired Chief Jeff Snyder, real good friend of mine out of St. Louis, and did the Whiteman stuff, and then he was our lead at the Guard Bureau. They came last November, Veterans Day weekend. Some of the weapons system team chiefs came, and we had a little reunion. I want to see if you guys can sign the back of that, and then I'll
Okay.
put the date that your podcast is released. So don't let me forget that.
Okay.
We want to pull that down. So, yeah. All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks for calling me, Terry. Really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Or you reached me through Messenger, I believe.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I saw that when you were interviewing KP and then Buck, and then because I worked, so many of the guys I've worked with, you had them out there, plus all of the various pilots, and I'm going, this would be good.
it's a
This
lot
would
of
be
fun.
really good. We got to get Emerson out here, and you got to get Langlois out here, and we'll throw down the challenge bar.
Yeah.
If you bring out Sean, it may cost you a beer, but
Well, and we haven't done it yet, but maybe this fall, get out there and we can get a panel of those guys that you're talking about right there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I've got 4 wireless microphones out in the box out there, so the heckler section we could mic them up.
oh, that would be awesome right
You
there.
could be one of the hecklers.
And then they could start drumming up old memories of, hey, you remember when you did this?
Yeah, so if you any of those guys happen to watch this, if you can they can get prepared, and maybe they'll decide I don't want to be up front, I want to be a heckler. But if they haven't been on yet, we won't let that happen. They'll be right up here.
Well, you can always get Doug Brush. He's a good heckler.
There you go, for sure. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Or do you have something more?
No, I was just going to say thanks for doing
Thanks.
this.
Yeah.
Appreciate
This is
bet.
awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. And Jim, thanks for being in the silent heckler section over there. And you're the youngest brother?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I love meeting people like this, and I love doing this. So,
Well, it's been a pleasure. It really has.
all right. Thanks, guys.
Now, if you
And-
could just wiggle your nose and get us back.
there you go. Always look forward.
Yeah.
Always looking forward. All right. And thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Take care.